So everybody knows this is Danny's desk, and my desk wouldn't look this messy.
Yeah, right.
So Carl, our first question is from James in Texas, who writes, Carl, my family and I just finished clearing up my grandfather's estate. I uncovered his old CJ2A. He definitely hasn't run it in 15 years or more. I would like to use it around the property. What are the first things I should do?
Well, the first thing, if you got it running and it runs, the first thing you got to do is put brakes on it. And if there was never no brakes on it for years and years, you just might as well put new wheel cylinders, master cylinder, probably the metal brake lines and the hoses, and just go through the whole thing, so that when you're done, you don't get nickel and dime to death with it.
All right, what's next? What do you do after that? After the brakes?
You know, also when you get it running, you have to check your oil, your antifreeze, and you know, you should go through the transmission transfer case and the front and back axles and check your oils in those, and your front knuckles, your steering box, and all that stuff. Grease it. You might want to check your gas tank, because if it's sitting a long time, you know, take a good flashlight and look in the tank and look if it's full of rust in the bottom and stuff. If it is, pull the tank out and try and see if you can clean it out a little bit. If the tank is all rusty on the bottom, you might want to consider putting another tank in it, because that rust will eventually get up into the fuel pump and carburetor and give you nothing but trouble all the time.
All right, great advice. Lastly, after they take care of all those issues, what about electrical?
I was just going to say that. You should take a look at all your wires and stuff under the dash, because that old cloth wire was woven over rubber, and usually the rubber is deteriorated by this time, and then the rubber and the cloth just falls off, and you have a lot of bare wires if all the wiring's original. And if that's the case, you don't have no choice but to put another harness in it.
Carl, our next question comes from Bill in Virginia, and Bill writes, Carl, I would like to rebuild my Jeep's original distributor. I can't find any documentation about the bearings and other parts inside. Is that because it's Autolite? If so, what do I do?
Back in those days with Autolite, when you had an Autolite starter, generator, distributor, you had to go to an authorized Autolite dealer to buy your parts, because they really weren't sold through the Willys, and it was probably the case with maybe Chrysler too, and whoever else used Autolite in them days. It seemed like this was more into the 40s, and when you started getting into the 50s, then you started to see the Autolite parts that were actually on the distributor, in the starter and generator, actually in the Jeep parts book, and you could buy it through the regular Willys dealer. But in the early days, there was some kind of agreement or something set up that didn't happen. And Autolite used to have a lot of, especially in bigger towns and cities, they had their actual own distributors in those towns and stuff, and you were supposed to go to them to buy that stuff. The easiest way that I found, I don't get distributors rebuilt because they really cost a lot of money to get done and get done right. And but there are guys, if you look in Hemmings Motor News and stuff, that actually rebuild them, and them guys will have the parts, and probably some of them guys maybe even had stuff reproduced to fix those old distributors, because Jeep wasn't the only one that used Autolite distributors, or many other car companies used them, and so those parts are common between a lot of those different car companies. It's costly to do because it's very time consuming to do them, and so they cost a lot. If you really want to keep your original Autolite in, you almost don't have a choice but to get it rebuilt. But if you're not really so much worried about that, you know, we do sell replacement distributors. We have electronic ones on 12 volts. Regular points distributors, still you can use them on 6 or 12 volts. It don't matter. And the distributors look close enough that most of the people would never know the difference. Anyway, you know, but unless you're like really going the extra mile to keep it original, you know, and you have a low mileage vehicle or whatever, or you just want to put something together that's you're gonna take the car shows and have it judged, and you want to spend the time and money to get an original one rebuilt. Make sure you buy all your parts from me.